So, to get started, what's your name? How old are you? And where are you from?
I'm Matt Strader. I'm 51 and I'm from Georgia.
All right. And how did you become an Elvis fan?
Yeah, I can't remember a time when Elvis wasn't in my life, but when I was a kid, I didn't have any music records or cassettes, but I did have a radio, an old transistor radio, and the big thing then was the radio station. So that was what made you cool at school.
Mhm.
And then one day in fifth grade, a teacher asked, what artist do you like? And I didn't know anything about artists. I just knew which radio station you had to put the radio on. Um, and she started naming songs and singing snatches of different songs from different entertainers. Some of them were Elvis, and I realized I knew every Elvis song that she named. I didn't know everybody else's, so I must have been an Elvis fan. That's where it was. That's where I figured it out. I was an Elvis fan.
Yeah. So, you are basically an Elvis historian. So, how did you get into researching Elvis? Like this, how did this become your calling?
So I would say about 20 years ago, I read Elaine Dundee's book,
Mhm.
um, Elvis and Gladys. And I'd been an Elvis fan before that, and I slowly collected his CDs. And I kind of thought, I've got every song he's got out there. I had probably 10 or 15 CDs, right? And they repeat a lot of those songs. And I didn't realize really the depth of the collection that's out there. Um, and I did get interested in the Elvis and Glass. And then I read the Larry Geller book, or one of them. They happened to be at the library I was near. And then I started to read some more Elvis books. And then I kind of disappeared for a while. And then about 10 years ago, I got sick and I had some time off, and I started reading a lot of Elvis books. And so now I've read, well over 100 and thousands of articles, um, and I started making notes about everything. And I kind of developed a little system to keep my notes in chronological order of his life. And therefore, I could go back and cross reference all of these different things that I've read. And now I've gotten to a point of starting to put them together to try to make sense of just this massive amount of information that I've got.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. I saw an article, or not an article, YouTube video that you interview you did with those Elvis girls. We'll put a link to that in our video. But where you went into a deep dive on just on Elvis's Bibles. I mean, that's how much you know and how much you've researched into Elvis. So if people haven't seen that, they should definitely check it out. But I want to give a little bit of a teaser of what we're going to do here with your interview. So you have done some research on a couple different fan stories. So after we get to know you a little bit, we're going to dive into a couple of these really interesting fan stories. So people make sure you stick around for that. And we're going to link a couple of we'll do a couple of videos in this kind of a series. So a little bit more about you. So what do you think is the most important thing that non-Elvis fans should know about Elvis?
So I think the most important thing is that they need to realize that Elvis was a self-actualized person. Sam Phillips didn't find Elvis. Elvis found Sam Phillips. Elvis was famous because he chose to be famous. He decided every step of his career. A lot of people say Colonel Parker did it, and these other people, and they point to them. And yes, he needed the teamwork, but he made all of those decisions.
Mhm.
Elvis was loved because he had great empathy, sympathy, and generosity for others. He proved that money does not bring happiness. And he was a person, and he made some bad choices, but he made a whole lot of really great choices. And those choices enriched and continue to enrich the lives of others. Elvis, I think about Elvis when he was a kid, and there were a lot of times that he missed meals. He was hungry. So he knew hunger on an intimate level. And today, there are people who are still eating meals today because of work he did more than 50 years ago, because he is still generating income. So people are still buying food with the money that they make from Elvis, and they're still feeding their families with them. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from Elvis, and they get glossed over in the icon status that he has.
Yeah, I want to touch on one of the things you said. So you said Elvis proves that money doesn't buy happiness. Can you explain that a little bit further?
Elvis did not care about money in the sense that it was money. He cared about it in the sense that it gave him freedom and allowed him to buy freedom for his friends and his family. So he was always thinking about what those around him needed. And there's a famous quote or a famous story from Vernon. that Vernon says that he got mad at Elvis one time about all the guys that were hanging around. He said, "You don't need all these people on the payroll. They just want things from you. They want." And Elvis said, "You see what they want. I see what they need."
Mm,
Uh,
I love that.
so that's what Elvis was about.
Yeah, and I love that you said he made some bad choices, but he made a lot of really good choices. And I think that a lot of people that are not Elvis fans focus on the bad choices. And I know as like
Right.
a newer Elvis fan, I feel a responsibility when people bring those things up to remind them and tell them about the good stories and the good choices that he made and the good things he did for the world. I think that's and the things that continue to enrich people's lives today. I think that a lot of Elvis fans tend to new Elvis fans especially a lot of older fans too, but they are better people because they're Elvis fans. I don't know if you would agree with
Oh,
that.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
Because they're
that's,
still doing things in his name that are great. And, I think you had a guy that you had interviewed a little while back that's still running an Elvis fan club that he started back in the 70s, and they're still doing good things for people. So,
yeah,
uh, I mean, wow,
I
right?
love it. So in that vein of a responsibility, kind of another question, random question, but do you feel a responsibility to get it right when you're doing your research?
Oh, yeah. So I definitely want everybody to know that the stories that we'll tell today, I can't guarantee that they're true, but I can guarantee that they're documented.
Hmm.
And sometimes only one document exists. And you just have to, as an Elvis fan, decide for yourself whether they're telling the truth or not. And I think in most cases, most people are telling the truth, and that you have to take them at their word until you can see something in the documentation or other facts that you find that disagree with that. And you never look at a person and their story for factual truth. That's what you find in reference books. You find that possibly in newspaper articles, possibly in encyclopedias, you'll find facts. But a person, they're not built to remember those things. They remember emotions. They're there to tell you an emotional journey. So a lot of people get hung up on details in a story where they don't really match the facts of what happened that day, but that's because the person doesn't remember those facts. They remember seeing Elvis. They
Hmm.
they don't remember anything else. They remember seeing Elvis, and it takes over all the rest of their memory. And it's like anything else in your life. You couldn't go back and give an exact recollection of any day of your life. So,
Yeah.
um, but you do remember the high spots of emotion,
Oh
and that's
yeah.
what you look for when you talk to a person.
Yeah, as I'm speaking with Elvis fans now, as I'm doing these interviews, anybody that ever saw him, I mean, like I get excited watching them get excited and like reliving it with them. And so that's always what I remember from my interviews is that just that like adrenaline that they get back in them when they start talking about seeing him. It's just it's beautiful to watch. So my last question about you before we get into these is what does being an Elvis fan mean to you today? Not a researcher, but a fan.
It means that I've always got uh, a piece of entertainment that I can go to that I've never seen before. Because every single day I find something new about Elvis, almost like having a friend.
Wow. I love that. I love that. And actually, I do have another question. What do you do with all of your research? You've got a lot of stuff. Like, do you have like a website? What do you do with all of it?
Well, at this point, I've cataloged a lot of it, and it's an ongoing process to catalog it. I'm always finding more, and then I've started to produce these small pieces, like I produced for what we're going to do today.
Mhm.
And then eventually, I'm thinking, I would never be able to publish anything that had photos and things like that because obviously I don't own those photos, but I could certainly publish the stories at some point, self-publish them through Amazon, or I could maybe make a website to put them all onto. So I haven't decided yet, but I want to get the stories out there because, like the three that we're going to look at today, I don't think there's a single fan alive today that knows these stories.
Yeah.
If there are, it's only two of them, and very, very few people will have ever heard of any of these people. But the stories should be remembered because I think they're pretty good stories.
So I hope you enjoyed getting to know our Elvis researcher, Matt Strader, a little bit. We're going to be having 3 additional videos in this series, each one going to be showcasing an Elvis fan story of somebody who has passed on. They're all really exciting, really great stories, really interesting. So like and subscribe and get to know these Elvis fans.